Joining us now, former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf and Fox News contributor Jonathan Turley, because we have operational, legal questions. Thank you both for being here with us. I want to start with you, Chad. Would these officers have been wearing body cameras? Will we get access to that at some point?
Well, the vast majority do not have body cameras, but as we know, there seems to be more and more video coming out. So I don't think the lack of video will be the issue here. I think we need to let the investigation play out, right? Because the FBI, if they're leading the investigation, they'll dig into all the video that we've seen, but they'll also do a lot of eyewitness testimony. We'll also try to understand what happened before, what were the instructions the officers were giving to this gentleman. And so all of this provides context. What was the threat picture? Did they understand? Did he announce that he had a concealed weapon as he approached the officers? I assume he did not. So a lot of this is going to get taken into consideration as that investigation unfolds.
Yeah, and we were just talking, literally just before I came to set, I saw a new video I hadn't seen before. I mean, they just continue to crop up, which will be helpful for investigators. I want to play something that Governor Walz said about this. There's been this talk that when state investigators showed up, that they were blocked from gathering evidence and looking into this. Here's what the governor said about the investigation moving forward.
Minnesota's justice system will have the last word on this. It must have the last word. As I told the White House in no uncertain terms this morning, the federal government cannot be trusted to lead this investigation. The state will handle it, period.
Jonathan, how does that showdown play out as we try to get answers?
Well, it's not true. I mean, this is unfortunately politics of the lowest kind, in that the governor is saying something to the public that's simply not true. This is a shooting involving a federal officer. Federal government is allowed to conduct its own federal investigation. The state cannot dictate who or when that investigation occurs. They can have a parallel investigation. That is certainly within their right, and I can understand why they would want to do that. But when he says that they and they alone will have the final word, it's not going to happen. And it's part of the complaint against the governor that he is out there fueling a lot of this rage and encouraging people to go out in the street to film these officers, which is fine if you do it from the sidewalk. In this case, you had someone who was impeding the officers, told to get out of the street, return to the street. And we have to drill down on what actually occurred in those final moments. The legal standard here is clear. Did the officer act reasonably in these circumstances? The court does not second guess split-second decisions. But we need to know. We have to see his hands. We have to see what happened at that moment right before an officer is heard saying gun.
Yeah, and that's a critical point when that happens. Staying with the legal beat on this, local officials there also say they're going to go to federal court tomorrow to try to get this entire operation shut down, to try to get ICE blocked. What do you think are the odds?
Zero. And, previously, the governor and the attorney general went in to try to stop the feds from bringing in more personnel to investigate fraud. These have absolutely no constitutional foundation. They may have some political benefit, but they have no legal recourse here in limiting the federal government. These are federal law enforcement officers. Despite what the governor said, where you told actual people to not treat them or refer to them as law enforcement, they are law enforcement officers, and they're allowed to enforce federal law.
Well, there's something that Secretary Noem said last night. If we could just work together, and she talked about a lot of jurisdictions where they are working federal officers, ICE, Border Patrol, with localities that do have Democratic leaders, and that this is not the situation that we're seeing in Minneapolis, that they actually have, deported tens of thousands of people through these targeted works. Now, I want to play something that Bob Jacobson, he's the public safety commissioner there in Minnesota, what he said about working together with the feds. Here's what he said last night.
If there are violent offenders or violent criminals or violent crimes, we will investigate and we'll bring those to justice. If the federal government would like to work with us, to continue to work with us as they have in the past, to locate those violent offenders, we are always open to those discussions and always willing to assist.
Okay, so is something getting lost in translation here? Because the feds are saying the locals are not helping us going after these. And he says if it's a truly violent criminal versus just rounding people up because they're in the country illegally, they're willing to help. Where has this broken down?
Well, it'd be interesting to understand what they are defining as violent, right? So if you're a criminal illegal alien, that's who ICE is interested in. They lodge detainers. Many of those detainers are not honored by places like Minneapolis and others. And so that's what ICE needs, which is the ability to go into those jail settings, both there at the local level and throughout the state, and to remove any criminal illegal alien that is in a jail setting. They can do that without going into the neighborhood. I mean, it's very clear that both Minnesota or Minneapolis is not working with DHS and ICE in that way.
Well, and how much of this lead up to this, because it's something that the Attorney General brought up yesterday, is when they've operated as sanctuary cities and sanctuary states in the past, it means that there is going to be a concentration of people that ICE or CBP is going to be interested in removing.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, ICE goes through a targeting system to try to identify where are the criminal illegal aliens. And if you did a heat map, the vast majority are in these sanctuary cities, not all. And I go back to your earlier point, like ICE does operations every day in places like Texas and Florida without any of this drama. And why is that? Because local law enforcement supports them, allows them to go into the jail, will go with them to provide that crowd control if they need it, if they have to go into a neighborhood to do an operation. None of that is at play in Minneapolis or a place like Portland or Chicago or anywhere else. And that's the issue. On top of that, you have the mayor and the governor saying they're not law enforcement, saying that they're propaganda machines. They are incentivizing their residents to go out and do these actions against ICE, and then that's where you have the issue.
Well, and of course, Jonathan, it raises all these questions that we keep hearing about the Insurrection Act, people saying we haven't met those conditions in Minneapolis and Minnesota, but it's essentially if state authorities and state courts are not able to handle what is happening there, what's the legal path? Should the president pursue it or not?
Well, I'm hoping that the president will not have to use the Insurrection Act. If the question is whether he can, the answer I think most clearly is yes, he can. The act is generally worded. Courts generally don't second guess. It was used during the civil rights period when Southern governors and officials also opposed the enforcement of federal law, different federal laws. This situation could be analogized to that. And what we're seeing in the city is this lack of local enforcement. You have ICE and Customs having to do crowd control in addition to trying to carry out these missions. And when the locals did take over the crime scene, by the way, they quickly lost control and they had to pull out. So all of that certainly can support that type of invocation. The danger here is that it's going to escalate this even further in terms of the tensions.
Yeah, that is a very real danger at this point. And our men and women in uniform and people in these communities, it feels very volatile for everybody involved. And the families and loved ones of Renee Good and Alex Preddy deserve answers. So hopefully there will be transparency for exactly what happened, just so people can have confidence in the folks who are there in uniform as well. Thank you both very much.